Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another installment of the NTC podcast, episode 80. If you can believe it, we're already 80 episodes through this thing, and we're just having more fun as the weeks and the months go on. In any case, we're glad you joined us. This is presented by Sports Business Classroom. And this evening, I have the opportunity to speak with our special guest here on this pod, Brett Usher. Brett is all over NBA Twitter. I personally love checking out his content just because he keeps things fresh. He keeps things exciting. He's always posting stats and highlight videos of players. And Brett, you strike a good balance, man. Like you'll bring up one day it'll be a current player to be Chris Paul about his one of his seasons in Charlotte where it's one of those underrated seasons where people forget just how good he was in his early years. And then, the next moment, it's one of those players from the past. So it'll be a Lamar Odom, you posted today, and, players like that. So love the content you bring to the table. I think you're a perfect fit for what we love to do on NTCs. Just have a good time, breaking down players, talking about what's going on in the league, and all that good stuff, man. So appreciate you joining the pod, and this should be a good combo. We're looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it as well, man. Really appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I like to think that I do strike a little bit of a balance because I'm almost like equally interested in just the past of the NBA because I look at NBA history as just this endless well of content. So a lot of times when people will be like, it's the off season, it's the slow season, there's nothing to talk about. It's like I just look back a little bit. There's lots to talk about. But then of course, I love the current NBA as well and all the young players and stuff. So but yeah, I appreciate the kind words, man, and it's great to be on here talking with you for sure.
Yeah, man, and something else I noticed about what you do. I mean, you're a fellow podcaster. You've been in the podcast game for a little bit, and you have your foot in a little bit of everything, and that's kind of how we operate at NTC is just trying to be well-rounded. Like we have our specialties, but at the same time, you want to be able to have conversations with people on different levels, whether we're talking about the salary cap or we're talking about scouting or the draft, whatever the case may be. Like to kind of keep it well-rounded and hit a variety of different topics. So notice that as well. That's good stuff for sure. So Brett, I hope you're ready for a fun convo here. We're going to bounce around a little bit. We're talk about a couple of players. One is rejoining his team, and another one is leaving his current team. And then we're going to get into some young prospects here, young cores around the league. That should be a fun convo. Looking forward to the future of the NBA. But to get things started, we're going to start with a player for a team that's not talked about quite too much right now, with the exception, of course, Brandon Miller. This team drafted him number 2 overall in the 2023 draft. But this player is PJ Washington, and he re-signed with the Charlotte Hornets for a contract value of $48 million. That's going to be over 3 years. And just looking at this deal initially, it seems very fair, seems very balanced for both sides. There are pros and cons from PJ's perspective, as well as from the Charlotte Hornets perspective. Now, the one and only Bobby Marks of ESPN Insider, brought us some information regarding this contract that makes it even more clear exactly how this thing is structured. So you could check out his tweets on Twitter if you guys are interested in seeing more of this stuff. But basically, he's going to get an incentive of $500,000 per year of this 3-year contract if he hits 74 games played and he plays at least 2,400 minutes. Those are unlikely bonuses. And just to nerd out for a second, just to give you guys a little bit more information on this, unlikely bonuses means these are benchmarks that the player did not achieve in the previous season. So he only played 73 games and 2,380 minutes last season, so it's considered unlikely bonuses. So the average annual value of this contract is about $15.5 million, just above the full limit level exception. So if you're looking at how much of this value is in context, it's a little bit more than the mid-level. So we're talking about a pretty average NBA contract, maybe a little bit above average, but the 3 years is good for PJ. He can still hit restricted. He can hit free agency again when he's about 28 years old, right in his prime. And then the team is not tied up to his contract for too long. So there are a lot of benefits here for PJ and the team. It makes sense to see why this deal was struck. But Brett, I wanted to throw this question at you first to kind of get this conversation going. I just wonder what the holdup was exactly, because free agency started on July 1st. As we record this podcast here this evening, it is August 30th. So almost 2 months went by without a deal for PJ Washington. And I was getting a little bit nervous. He's a good player. He's still young. He has a lot to contribute to this team and other teams around the NBA. So as far as why it took so long to kind of surface, why do you think that is? Is it the restricted free agency part of it? Could something else be at play? What are your initial thoughts about the timing of this whole contract negotiation?
Yeah, I mean, you got to think some of it was just him hoping that more money was out there, that there was going to be a significant qualify or a significant offer sheet sent his way. I'll tell you, like, I thought by now, like, he would just end up signing that qualifying offer, kind of betting on himself, becoming an unrestricted free agent next summer.
Mhm.
That's what I would have guessed because it had dragged out so long. So I was a little surprised that he did sign for 3 and 48. But I would say it was just a combination of him just looking for an offer sheet, looking for more money out there. And then, when that wasn't there, I think there was probably like a negotiation component with the Hornets where it was like, maybe he wanted a fourth year. Maybe he wanted a player option or something. Like maybe there was some kind of impasse in the negotiations between him and the team. Because, for him to even take 348 rather than just signing the qualifying offer, trying to ball out for a year and then making, something like 480 or 490 or something next summer. Like for him to just take that 3 year makes me think he values the long-term security, even though that's not super long-term, it is a guaranteed, nearly $50 million. So
Yep.
thinking about that as his mindset, I would be inclined to think that he was probably looking for a fourth year. And, I don't know what the negotiations were between him and the team, but I would think that it was something along those lines, that maybe he was just looking for that extra year. And it just took this long. And when there was nothing else out there, he kind of, I don't want to say settled for this, because I do think it's a fair offer. I think it's fair value for him. But prior to the offseason, I probably would have thought he could command a little bit more, whether that's something a little bit longer term or a little bit more money annually from another team, perhaps. So it
Mhm.
was a little surprising altogether, but I think it was probably just a combination of that, him just waiting for the right offer, and when that didn't come, maybe negotiating with the Hornets. But it's weird. It's like I almost forgot, that he was out there. Like I'm
Right.
like, wow, PJ Washington still hasn't signed. Like he's a good
Yeah,
player.
this is a starter we're talking about here.
It's a really nice player. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you go back and look at what he did last season. I mean, this guy played 73 games. He started all 73. Like, we forget that sometimes. This isn't a guy that was playing 20 minutes a game and came off the bench and he was a sixth or seventh man or something. He was a starting four for, of course, we got to keep in mind here. This wasn't a great team, and Charlotte was one of the worst teams in the league last season. But nonetheless, still starting four, started 73 games, played a good amount of minutes. So, I mean, he brings a lot to the table, specifically from a scoring standpoint. I think that's where a lot of the appeal comes into play for PJ Washington. The fact that he can get you a bucket from pretty much all three areas of the court, from three, from the two, restricted area. Pretty skilled for his size, 6'9", 6'10" type of player. Being able to use his size effectively is definitely one of his strengths. But yeah, I mean, going back to the whole deal with the timing of this thing, I think he probably wrestled with this for a while as far as which direction he wanted to go. Like you were saying, there were, of course, the benefit of taking the qualifying offer would have been the fact he could have hit free agency next year and would have had an opportunity to go wherever he wanted to go. But it looks like even though Charlotte is still not in a great situation, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to put them in the mix for a playoff spot next season. He's still going to have an opportunity to play a lot of minutes. Uh, Even with Miles Bridges back on board, I think PJ would still start going into next season, day one. The minutes are still going to be there. He can still ball out and get a new contract in a few years. But I mean, Brett, we know this, man. I mean, all it takes is one injury, and your career's totally changed. So, and we've seen guys take the qualifying offer before. I'm sure you remember Nerlens Noel several
Hmm.
years ago. He
Yeah.
he took that qualifying offer. He had an extension on the table. He had an offer. I think it was 4 years, something about 70 million. He turned it down, and it really
Dallas. Yeah.
worked against him. It was a really kind of tragic tale. So for PJ, he saw the opportunity of the money, and hey, money talks, man. So I mean, you see it on the table. Sometimes you got to take it. But
Yeah.
kind of diving into what PJ brings to this team now that he's on board, what are the major benefits of his game? I mean, I did highlight a little bit of the 3-level scoring, but I think we forget sometimes exactly what he brings to the table as a player. So, what's the appeal for you when you look at PJ Washington and what he's going to bring to Charlotte as a starting four, being only about 25 years old?
Yeah, I mean, I think versatility really is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about PJ Washington, and that applies on both sides of the ball. You know, like you're saying, offensively, he can obviously shoot the ball. He's about a career 37% 3-point shooter. That might not even do his shooting ability justice. He's probably even a little better than that. He can score in the post a little bit. We saw last year he was kind of empowered to run more pick and roll, to get more post ups, to create more off the dribble, to play make a little more. So just a very versatile player offensively. And then defensively, you know, he can switch. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I don't know if he's like elite switchable, but he's very switchable. He can guard pretty much every position depending on the matchup off a switch. I mean, I would say he's like loosely in the PJ Tucker, Grant Williams mold. I would almost say like, you know, if you look at what Aaron Gordon did for the Nuggets, like if you could picture Aaron Gordon with like less athleticism and a little more shooting, like he could be something along those lines. And like, so I think he's a guy that could really shine on a good team. And unfortunately, Charlotte has not really been that and is probably not going to be that next season. But if they do, you know, ascend over the next few years and they become a playoff team, I think he could really shine with his skill set. Like, as good as he was last year, I think he'd be even more better and more valuable and more recognized for his ability if he was on a good team. Just a
Mhm.
quality player. He's the type of player that every team needs. And that just goes back to like, it is a little surprising that some team didn't just offer him 18 to 20 a year. But I just
Mhm.
think, you know, it's like if you don't get scooped up in that first wave of free agency, the money kind of dries up.
Right.
And it's like how many teams could really have offered him more than the mid-level, like the full mid-level, which you know was like with 12, 13, somewhere in there. And
Mhm.
you know, you got to think Charlotte probably put out like, you know, we're gonna match everything, or at least up
Yep.
to a certain point, certainly up to what they paid him. And there just wasn't a market for him, which it was definitely surprising because, you know, just talking about him, I'm like, man, he's a really nice, valuable player. He's a guy that
Yeah.
any team would want to have. Like we've seen the value of these players, and like when we talk about this sort of mold, like he's probably on the high end in terms of shooting, and he's young. He
Mhm.
just turned 25.
Yeah.
Um, Very nice player. So this is a great get for Charlotte. Like I don't remember if you mentioned, but like in addition to just the incentive structure of the deal, like it's a descending deal too, right? Like it's front loaded as far as I understand, where he's going to end up in the third year, he's at like 14 and a half, something like that.
Yep.
So it's a
Mhm.
great deal for Charlotte. I mean, it's going to be a very tradable contract if they want to go that route. And just at face value, like I would say it's a little below value for him. But yeah, on the other hand, like you were saying, like you gotta just, you know, you gotta understand where he's coming from, and anything can happen. You know, you could get injured in that one year. You could have like the Nerlens Noel situation. So you can't blame him for just taking the guaranteed money. It's a lot of money, and like you said,
Mhm.
he'll be 28 at the end of this deal. He can, you know, he'll still be in his prime. So
Yeah.
kind of a win-win. I would definitely say it's a little more like a little more team friendly
Yeah.
on that side, a
Agreed.
little bit. Yeah. If
Yeah.
you're a Hornets fan, you're happy.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I mean, I'm happy myself, man, because he's on my dynasty team in fantasy. And
There you go.
I would go and look at my team and I wouldn't see a team name next to him. And I'm just like, all right, what's going on here? Like, what's the deal? Is he going to sign a minimum somewhere? Like, is he going to be stuck behind a bunch of forwards and see his playing time diminish? So, I was sweating a little bit, but I mean, obviously it worked out for him. And the restricted free agency tab next to his name, I think that also contributed as to why it was a huge contributor in the fact that he was on the market for so long.
Mm,
You mentioned that money dries up the longer we go in. And I'm sure teams are not going into free agency looking at the restricted free agents as primary targets. Because if you make an offer, your money is tied up. It used to be 3 days. With the new CBA, I think it's going to be cut down to one. I'm not sure if it's down to one now or it's going to be later, but it's either 1 or 2 days your money is tied up in the player. That's a huge disadvantage if you're trying to go
That first
after.
that first week or whatever of free agency, yeah, you can't 2,
Yeah,
3 days, whatever it is, like that's
yeah,
definitely if you fully expect, his team to match, then it's like
right.
it's kind of like the
It's like,
Austin
why?
Reeves,
What are we
right?
doing?
Like you like it's like why
Mhm.
didn't anybody, throw an offer sheet at Austin Reeves? And it's like because the Lakers were just gonna match everything and they just probably didn't think it was
Yeah,
worth it to have their money tied up for a couple days.
right. Yeah, so that's probably what it was. It kind of started him on the path towards being a free agent for a little bit longer. And then from there, it was probably that back and forth over details. It was probably like, okay, how many years? I want 4. We want to do 2. Maybe we meet in the middle. What do the incentives look like over time? Is it going to be flat? Is it going to be descending? There are a lot of details they probably had to work out, but in the end, it definitely worked out for both sides. So you look at Charlotte now as a whole. Their front line looks pretty solid. You have PJ Washington. You look at Nick Richards. You look at those. You look at Mark Williams, who they just drafted last year, looking really solid after rookie season. And then Miles Bridges, of course, back on board for 1 year. So you look at the 4-5, looks pretty solid. They have depth there. They have some young talent. So even though the team itself still has some holes to figure out, the front line looks pretty solid. And I like the fact that he's going to be there. He's versatile. He's working with Brandon Miller. He's working with Melo. He's got a great rim protector next to him, so he can display a little bit more of that ability to be versatile in the perimeter and have that back line behind him. And then, of course, he can play small ball 5. He did have some small ball 5 there and here and there during the season. And I mean, looking at his last 19 games or so of last season, so between February 8th and March 31st, I mean, he was at about 18 points a game, 47% from the field, 37% from 3, with about 6 boards. And he had a 42-point game in that span as well. Actually, 43 points. So you look at his potential, you look at his talent level, it's there. So it's just about how he's going to fit in with those other guys. I think it should be pretty smooth. And then just seeing where everybody goes from here. It's another developmental year, but I think everybody's going to be on the same page, and everybody can take a step forward now that he's on board, and they can focus on the task at hand for next season.
Yeah, you got to wonder though, like say if Miles Bridges wasn't coming back, like would he have just taken the qualifying offer maybe? Like I wonder
Hmm.
how much of that decision was based on the fact that not only Bridges was coming back, but like you got Mark Williams now, who looks like a bona fide starting center. Nick Richards has taken a leap. You drafted Brandon Miller, who's, whatever, he's kind of a 3. But there's just like, there's almost sort of a logjam here where like, I think PJ will start, but I don't think it's like a certainty. I would assume they would have him above Bridges for now, like on the depth chart. But like, if you look at
To
the
start,
last year,
yeah,
yeah, I would think so. But like the last year that they played together, like in 21-22, like Bridges kind of emerged as the starter and PJ
yeah,
was coming off the bench the majority of the time. And when you throw in these other bigs now and Brandon Miller, it's like, I wonder, if PJ had this thought in his mind where it's like, I take this qualifying offer and then I only end up playing 24 minutes a game and like, coming off the bench most of the season. And then maybe, that money's not where I want it to be next offseason. Like, I just wonder how much that was a factor. Cause like, it's weird.
yeah,
Like they're not like a good team, but it kind of feels like they've got a lot of, you know, 3, 4, fives.
yeah.
And he's
They
in
do.
that mix. And if it was, they're one of the a lot of the starting lineups in the league right now heading into the season seem pretty much set in stone. Charlotte's one where I'm like, I don't really know what that's going to look like. Like,
Yeah,
I can't really imagine they bring Brandon Miller off the bench, but I don't know. Like, then if not him, then who else? Like, I'm kind of
right.
intrigued by because you forget they have Gordon Hayward. Like, maybe he plays the
Yeah,
2, and then you've
that's true.
got Bridges, Washington, Miller, Mark Williams, and like one of those guys has to come off the bench. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting lineup to think about, and I think that might add some bearing on PJ's decision to just take the sure thing money rather than gamble on himself.
Exactly. And Miles Bridges is a 1 year contract. So, I mean, regardless of how things shake out, Miles Bridges might only be in the fold for 1 more season and he might be out. And then
Yep.
PJ is still got 2 years left and he can reassert himself as the guy at the 4 and get more minutes. I mean, it also depends on what they do after that. But the runway could be there for him to get that minutes low, the opportunity he's looking for. So it makes sense for him to get more years, and he can see what Miles Bridges is going to do without having to worry about his own free agency situation, I
Right.
guess.
Because
So
if
they
he
all
was
kind
if
of
he was just on that 1 year qualifying offer, then like, who knows? Maybe the team's like, okay, we're probably going to be losing this guy anyway after the season. So maybe he gets deprioritized a little bit. So
yeah,
there's probably was just a lot to consider. And I'm inclined to think he probably made the right decision because it's like how much was going to be there for him as a UFA next offseason? Like
yeah,
probably not like 25 a year. So like maybe
yeah,
a little more than
yeah.
16, but like I see where he's coming from, I think.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
It really makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
So PJ Washington's in a great situation. JaVale McGee, on the other hand, maybe not so much as of right now. We'll see what happens kind of going forward. But pretty recently here, the news came out that JaVale McGee was waived by the Mavericks. And this was on the horizon for actually a little bit of time now. I think a week ago or so, it was initially reported that they were thinking about doing this. But of course, JaVale McGee had decent salary left on his contract. So the team probably wanted to kind of wait and see how things shook out. If any other deals became available, if there was a trade to be had. JaVale McGee's contract could have been used as matching salary and things like that. So since that didn't happen, they went ahead and decided to waive him because if they didn't, they wouldn't have been able to use the waive and stretch provision. And the waive and stretch provision can only be used up until July 3rd. I'm sorry, August 31st, because after that, the contract is basically paid out as normal starting September 1st. They wouldn't be able to stretch the 23-24 season's money out. So they wouldn't have been able to save the money for this coming season. So obviously they wanted to save money now. And as a result of that deal, they're about a $5.5 million under the tax line. So for the Mavericks, they're still pretty money conscious here. Yes, they have Kyrie re-signed, they have Luka's supermax on the books, but if you're around the tax, you might as well do what you can to stay under it. You don't want to be just over it. So it was a good move for them. They're pretty stacked at that position, honestly, even without McGee. Holmes is in the fold. They made that trade for him. Derek Lively was drafted. And then, of course, you look at Dwight Powell being back in the mix as well. They're a solid, steady guy they've had for several seasons. So they're pretty set at center, it looks like. And the JaVale McGee money is going to be stretched over 5 seasons. You got to do a little arithmetic here. You got to do a little bit of math, not too much, but you basically take the total years left multiplied by 2 plus 1. So you got this coming season, you got next season for the player option times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. So you do the 11.7, you divide it by 5, and you get somewhere around $2.3 million a season. It's going to help them this season. It's going to help them next season. After that, they're going to have a couple million of dead money on their books that they wouldn't have otherwise had. But overall, it makes sense for the Mavericks, and they're going to be in a pretty good position here. So, I mean, Brett, do you have the similar thoughts here? Good move. Did it make sense for you? And did you really see this deal coming up on the horizon just because of the fact that JaVale McGee is probably the odd man out in that whole rotation there in the center?
Yeah, I mean, I like JaVale. I always have. Obviously, it just didn't work out last year for whatever reason. Maybe some of that is he's just getting a little older. He's not quite what they expected him to be. Maybe some of it was just fit. Maybe they were asking too much of him. I'm not sure, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out. He wasn't factored into their future plans. And yeah, I'm not surprised by this at all. Like I feel like this had been talked about for the last couple months, maybe even longer. This McGee stretch and wave and stretch potential. But yeah, they're they get a little bit more flexibility, certainly in the short term, the next couple years. Did they sign Markieff Morris for? I remember I read something like they were expected to. I don't know if that's been made official yet. Maybe with some of that that space that was freed up by waving McGee. But either way, I think they're going to be bringing him back. And yeah, and like, you mentioned it, like they don't have a great center, but they have a lot of centers. And McGee was probably
Mhm.
just going to be at the bottom of that pecking order behind
Yeah.
Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber, who is going to be back healthy. Could be a pretty big factor for them, I think. I think he tore his hamstring in December last year, and he came back, but he just really wasn't right. And if you know anything about
Yeah,
hamstring injuries, that can take a while to come back from. So I think having him back
for
healthy will
sure.
be big. And then Rashawn Holmes and Derek Lively and even Grant Williams can play some small ball five. So it's like, where would McGee really factor in? It's probably just best to free up a little bit of room, create a little bit of flexibility, and let him go. Kind of do right by him too. Hopefully he can latch on with a good team for next season, because I think he's still got a little bit left in the tank. It just didn't work out
Sure.
in Dallas.
Sure. And looking forward for McGee specifically, I think Chris Haynes reported this a couple of days ago that it's possible that he signs with the Sacramento Kings. Now, that's not official or anything as of today. We don't know if that's actually going to happen. But, if you look at the Kings rotation, you look at who they have at that center position and where McGee could possibly fit in, there could be a space for him there. There could be a spot. Obviously Sabonis is going to be the guy to kind of lead the charge once again. I believe Alex Len is still with the team, if I remember correctly. So, they definitely have some bigs already. But, JaVale McGee has another veteran presence there. Oh, they also have Nerlens Noel. I actually forgot about that as well. But another veteran presence like JaVale McGee, multiple-time champion, really turned his career around at the halfway point. Has been a solid guy ever since. A good shot blocker, a good rebounder, really plays hard. So as a guy that can come in and give you some spot minutes and just some additional depth at that position, because in today's NBA, you can never have too much depth with the way guys go down and the uncertainty of players' health. Never hurts to have another guy in the locker room. Even if he doesn't play that much, just having him there to be able to be in the ear of Sabonis and these other guys, I think would be a huge benefit. So, does Sacramento strike you as a possible destination? Like, do you like that as a landing spot for him?
Yeah, no, I do. And it seems almost likely, given the reporting by Haynes. And then also you have to consider McGee's relationship with Mike Brown. McGee was there in Golden State for, I believe, the 17 and 18 championships. And Mike
Correct.
Brown
Yeah.
was obviously the lead assistant on those teams. So I know that the two of them have a relationship, and I'm sure that's part of the intrigue here for, Sac looking at bringing him in. And like you said, just having a veteran presence, like even if he doesn't play big minutes, like McGee is a pro's pro. Like this guy, he's 35, but he takes great care of himself. He's been in the league a long time. You don't really, you'll see like Shaq and a fool and everything, but you don't hear anything bad about this guy. Like I would describe him as a pro's pro. And then if you look at the Sac roster, like that is a hole. Like that was obviously last season, that was a weakness, was like backup center. Alex Len, who I think deserves some credit. He's been, I feel like anytime he's called on, he's been pretty solid for that team. But right now you're looking at this sort of backup center platoon of Alex Len, Nerlens Noel, and Neemias Queta, who I like Queta a lot. He's a pretty fearsome rim protector.
He is.
He really is. Like he's one of those guys like dudes don't even want to test. So he was the guy I kind of had pegged as like being their backup center heading into this season. And then you have Noel, who, if he's healthy, he's a very good defensive player. It's just like,
Oh yeah.
that's such a big if. He's struggled with injuries so much. And then you have Len, who's just not the most exciting guy. So they could use another piece there. Because rim protection was really their biggest weakness, and that's really what JaVale does best. So you could get him on, a minimum deal. Like I think it makes a lot of sense for them. And just again, based on the reporting, like if I had to guess where is he going to end up, I would say Sac. Just based on the reporting and kind of the holes in their roster. So because they're a young team, they're not super young, but they're on the younger side. They're younger than people realize when you look down their roster. And last year was their first real taste of success in a long time, obviously. So
Long time.
a long time. So I don't think having a veteran presence like McGee could hurt. He'll land somewhere, and that kind of strikes me as the most likely spot. Yeah.
I can see that as well. Looking at the rotation, it's crazy to think that last season they can go from a deficit at center, like you mentioned, to almost like a oversaturation, almost, or at least just a very deep rotation at center. I'm glad you brought up Neemias Queta, because I've watched him I'm going back through now watching the summer league games in Vegas, the ones that I missed. And I mean, Keita is a guy that stands out to me just about every time I watch the Kings play,
Mhm.
just because of his energy, his size. I think they mentioned he's like 7 feet, 240, 250, something like that. And just super intimidating. Like, you don't
Yeah.
want to challenge a guy like that at the rim if you don't have to. Non-guaranteed for about $2 million this season, 2.1 next season. So a very kind of low risk, high reward type of guy. Nerlens Noel is non-guaranteed for about the same amount of money, about $2 million. So those guys are on the roster today, but they are not yet fully guaranteed players. So if you think about that, then it actually makes even more sense to bring on a guy like JaVale McGee, who I believe probably would be fully guaranteed for at least one season. Nerlens Noel and Keita, according to what we have on our website, they don't become fully guaranteed until January 10th. So a pretty decent chunk in the season are not guaranteed. So if they bring on JaVale McGee and for some reason Noel doesn't work out, if Keita doesn't work out, one of them regresses or something just doesn't click, JaVale McGee could be a guy that takes spots. So just something else to consider. Alex Len is guaranteed, so I would assume he'd be in the rotation at some point throughout the season. But those other two guys, I mean, maybe it's a competition. Maybe it's hey, there's two spots available. There's one spot available for two players. Let's see who prevails in this battle against a veteran and a younger player. So that could be some healthy competition for a spot. And then JaVale McGee might just be that second player to take the place of whichever one of those two doesn't quite make the cut. So that could be another way to look at it. And then just having a guy next to Sabonis being able to provide support. If he gets hurt, that would be tough. But just having enough guys, enough bodies to be able to compensate for that, I think would benefit them a lot and really help them in that pursuit for another playoff appearance. I mean, everybody's hungry; they want another one. So give yourself your best, the best chance you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you just look at their roster, like I don't have it in front of me, but just off the top of my head, it's like they've got a nice backup point guard in Davion Mitchell. They've got Malik Monk as kind of a shooting guard coming off the bench. You've got either like Vezenkov, EuroLeague MVP, or like or Keegan Murray, depending on which way they go with that. You've got Harrison Barnes in there, and it's like you've got Trey Lyles as kind of a backup four. So it's like the one question mark is backup five. And like, I think sometimes that's what you have to do in that situation is just, hey, like we're not going to get like we don't have an elite backup five. We can't get an elite backup five. But if we just throw JaVale and Nerlens Noel and Alex Len and Nehemias Queta into the mix and just kind of see who emerges in that spot. Like, I think I think it will be a battle, at least between a couple of those guys for sure, even assuming they do sign McGee, which, seems like a pretty good chance, but yeah, look, the thing with JaVale, and I actually tweeted about this yesterday, like he's only 2 years removed from one of his best NBA seasons. Like with Phoenix in the 2021-22 season, he was outstanding. Like he filled in for Ayton for a while when Ayton was out as starting center. He put up great numbers. He was very productive. He looked good. He looked fresh. He looked young. I think it was his age 34 season, but he looked great. It was a really nice season. I would probably put that in like his 3 or 4 best seasons as a pro, like from an individual standpoint. And that was
Mm-hmm.
21-22. So like, yeah, he had one disappointing season with Dallas after that, but he's not that far removed from it. And that's why I still think he could help a team. I still think he has something to offer at age 35. I think he might turn 36 during the coming season, but I still like him as a backup five in the right situation.
Me too. Me too. He's going to stick somewhere. Sacramento's the most likely, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Regardless, somebody's going to get a good vet. And that's some good info right there. He's not far removed from a really, really solid NBA campaign. Enough of this old talk, man. Let's go young. Let's turn the tables a little bit. Let's look at some of the best young cores in the NBA as of today. This is subjective, so I mean, no right or wrong answers here. I just wanted to highlight this because we're watching Shea in the World Cup right now, put on a show. We're watching Josh Giddey put on a show. We just got out of summer league not too long ago, about a little over a month ago, watching some of these young guys, the same thing, just put in absolute incredible performances. And the NBA is in great hands. So why not highlight some of these young cores to see exactly who we're most interested in seeing I made a list of about 4 teams that have some of the best young cores in the NBA. This is not an exhaustive list. There are others, but I wanted to start with these 4. Get your thoughts on them, and maybe rank these guys a little bit. I know that's almost impossible, but
Yeah.
in any case, I figured it'd be fun just to kind of see where our heads are at when it comes to these 4 teams. So listeners can probably guess who these teams are: Orlando, Oklahoma City, Houston, Detroit. You look at these rosters, they all have emerging stars. They all have great quality role players. They have guys that we're still kind of waiting to see what they could become ultimately as players. But in any case, there's a lot of excitement here. So Brett, when you look at these 4 teams, and I'm sure you've tweeted about all of them at one point or another, uh, is there one that kind of stands out to you as far as maybe not even the team that you think is going to be the best, but the team that you're just like, man, I am the most hyped about this team because XYZ, they're going to be box office. It could be a blueprint for roster construction. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So, are you able to rank these teams? If so, who tops the list for you as far as who you just can't wait to see develop and kind of take their place in the NBA's elite in here and the near future?
Yeah, no, we gotta rank them, of course. But it is tough to do. And look, though, I would have to have OKC at the top. Um,
I like it.
Big part of that is just what they've already accomplished, right? Like I think they won 40 games last year. They far exceeded expectations. A lot of people had them projected like in the low 20s for wins. So they had a really nice season. They ended up losing in the play-in, but they were right there on the cusp of the playoffs. And they've got Shea. So like if we're, like this is an MVP level player. This is an all NBA first team guy. This is a guy that I like as kind of like a long shot MVP candidate next season. I want to say the betting odds have him like 8th or 9th. I'd probably have him in my top 5 just because like I think if OKC could win like 48, 50 games, we think about the numbers he puts up and how impactful he is. He's right there. So I think just having Shea and then just their kind of level of success last season, I have to put them first. And I just like how their pieces fit. Like I mean, Giddey,
Yeah.
they just have all these like between Shea, Giddey, and J Dub, Jalen Williams, like they've just got these 3 kind of like big creator guard kind of guys. Like they're almost like positionless in that sense. And then I'm also very high on Chet Holmgren, like very,
Yeah.
very high on that kid. I think he's going to be a monster rim protector from the jump in the NBA. So, yeah, when you
Sure.
factor in that trio, not to mention Lou Dort, who I think is a lot younger than most people realize. Like, I think he's only
Yeah.
like 23. He kind of
Yep.
seems older, but he's super young. So he's part of that young core as well. And then they drafted Cason Wallace. Like they've got Ousmane Dieng, who I like a lot. I think he's got almost as high a ceiling as anybody. I don't know if he's going to hit it, but when you talk about potential, he's right there. So they would be my number 1 because like I think even next season, again, this is a team that could win 45 plus games. That's not even like a hot take. Like I think they're probably projected in that range. Like in 50 wouldn't
Oh yeah.
even surprise me for that team. So just being
Hmm.
that far ahead of the game with such a young average age, like even Shea, I think just turned 25. I think Giddy's like
Yeah.
20, maybe 21. Chet is like 21. Like J Dub maybe 21, 22. They're very, very young and they're
Yeah.
already like legitimately good. So they have to be number 1 for me if we're ranking them. And we can go from there.
Agreed. Agreed. We're on the same page.
Yeah.
I've been a Shea supporter for uh, probably since his Clipper days, and he was putting on a show there in that first round series against the Warriors. Uh, 18 was it 18 2018 I think, where they played in that first round, Clippers
18,
Warriors.
18, 18, 19. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Ever since then, and I saw what he did on that stage against that team, I was like, yeah, there's something brewing there. And then
Yeah,
of
he had like a
course
20.
next,
I think he had a 25-point game, something like that.
yeah,
I remember that too. Yeah, he was
yeah,
outstanding.
he was, and you
And
could
then they
see the
traded
the
him.
bones. Yeah, they traded him, and I tweeted this the other day. I was like, they did not want to trade this guy. I mean, when the time came, and it's like, all right, if we're gonna give you Paul George, we need Shea, and they're just like, oh, we do not want, because they saw he was going to be a great player.
Yeah.
I don't know if they saw MVP, but they saw definitely a star, possibly even a superstar ceiling. So that's all on display right now. We see it in the World Cup. We see him taking ankles. We see him just putting on all around show. And then, yeah, you go down the roster. I think the main reason, and I think that we're kind of on the same page here. The main reason they're number one is because they have a history of success already. They're building that resume. And then on top of that, everything kind of fits into place. And I will go ahead and spoil my team. Not that I'm low on this team. I still love what they have going, but I have questions about the Magic's roster just because of the guard situation, the backcourt. When you look at all these guys, they have a lot of great players, but it's like, how do they all fit together, specifically when it comes to the 1 and the 2? So it's like, what do they do with Fultz? What do they do with Suggs, Cole Anthony? I just kind of wonder how that all breaks down. So they're kind of the opposite end for me as far as how things are fitting together right now. It's not going to take a lot to change that, obviously. They can make a couple of trades. They can cut a couple of guys, and they're in great shape. I just need to see how they deal with the backcourt and that lack of shooting as well. Black, Fultz, Suggs, none of these guys really have the ability to space the floor all that well. So just some question marks, not overly concerned or anything, but how do you feel about the Magic? Like, are you obviously they're not one, but where would you put them in your 1 through 4 rankings here?
It's funny because I definitely agree with you about their guard room. Like how do all those guys fit together? A trade seems inevitable, whether that comes, at the deadline this year or next offseason. Like, I feel like it's going to happen. Like, and yeah, it's like you look at the main 2 guys, obviously, are Franz and Paolo. And, you kind of feel like you want to surround them with shooters. You kind of want to have guards who can shoot. And then, yeah, like you said, Fultz, Suggs, Black, they're like non-shooters, kind of. If you know what I mean. It's not just like that they're not great. Cole Anthony can shoot the ball, obviously, but I like all those guys. But yeah, it's like, how does that fit? But like that said, I think I still have them too, just on the strength of Franz and Paolo. Like, you've got this pair of
legit,
bro, two like 6'10" wing creators that are like 20 and barely 22, respectively. So I think just on the strength of those guys, and I absolutely love Markelle Fultz. Like, I think he's kind of the guy right now at point guard. Again, another guy that's a lot younger than people realize. Like, I think he's younger than Tatum. Like, he's a very young dude. So I think that's the guy at point guard. And then you have Wendell Carter at center, who should be mentioned as well. I think he just turned 24. So they're a very young team. And like, however it sorts out between Suggs and Cole Anthony and Ant Black, like, and Fultz, like, however that works out, I still think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the near future. And like, if you look at their last season, like, they were, after Fultz came back, pretty much, I want to say the date, I've mentioned this a few times, I think the date was like December 7th, but from December 7th on, they were above 500. They were a team that could have made a play-in push for sure if they, really wanted to, I think, down the stretch. So once they kind of got Carter and Fultz back from injury, they were like a legitimately good team. They beat a lot of good teams. They were really tough. So like, kind of along the lines of what I was saying with OKC is like, we've kind of seen it with these guys, and like OKC, they've got a really nice young coach. And yeah, but I agree with you, man. Like, the guard rotation is something that needs to be sorted out. And I guess this is just the year to do it. Like, they drafted Anthony Black, like, 6th overall. So you have to think he's a priority. And then you've kind of got these 2 shooters from Michigan and Jet Howard and Caleb Houston. And it's like, I think one of those guys is going to emerge as a very important player for this team. Like, they need spacing. Maybe it'll be both, but I think at least one of them will hit. And I think Carter Jr. is just a really underrated big. Like, he's rock solid. So yeah. So the only real question mark for me is kind of the guard room. And I guess maybe like the ownership and front office going forward. Like, I don't know, they've nailed a few picks. So I'm becoming a believer, but But yeah, I would have them too, though, and that's tough. Like these teams are
Yeah,
very hard to rank. But like, I mean,
it is.
we've all seen Paolo in the World Cup and
Yep.
France when he was healthy. Like these guys are serious.
They're studs, man. Powell
Yeah,
specifically, yeah. I mean, my eyes have been open to his defensive ability.
yeah,
The way he's smacking shots out the backboard, I was like, I did not know you were going to show up like this defensively.
yeah.
So that surprised me. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's really tough to put them in that spot, and just because of like, yeah, their front court is sensational, and we didn't even touch on Jonathan Isaac. So I mean,
It's
if
like, but
you,
who knows with him, man? Like, yeah,
yeah, we don't know.
if he's healthy,
That would
like
be
even
that would
last
be
year, remember
incredible.
when he came back? I don't even know what he played, if he played 8 games or something last season, but like
Very brief.
he looked
Yeah.
really good. He was shooting the
Yeah.
ball really well. Like he had this fadeaway jumper he was knocking down. He averaged like 5 steals per 36. Like he looked really good in
Yeah.
a short time. And then he goes down again. But like, yeah, he's the one
Yeah.
where like I don't even mention him when I talk about this team because it's as much as I love his game, it's
You just
just
don't
such a
know.
question. He's missed so much time. He's just like
Yeah.
icing on
Yeah.
the cake. You get healthy Jonathan
Yep.
Isaac. This is a playoff team, in my
Yep.
opinion.
No,
Yeah.
100%. He's one of the top defenders in our league. So I mean,
Yeah.
obviously he's going to raise the ceiling even more. But touching on another one of these teams, you mentioned your number two was Orlando. Uh, when I was thinking about this, I think I ended up on Houston as my two. Seeing what Jabari Smith has added to his game this summer, seeing what Sengun is turning into as like a Jokic light type of player, looking at Cam Whitmore set the hoops on fire, the Nets on fire in summer league, like right out the gate, hitting threes off the dribble, I think there were 2 games where he had a dunk in the first 5 seconds of the game off the jump ball. Like he was just like chomping at the bit to get in there and put his imprint on the game after being drafted 20th. And then of course, you bring in Amin Thompson, a guy I had the opportunity to watch in person one time at Overtime Elite here in Atlanta, and just blown away by what he can bring to a team. And I mean, I'm super high on what he can do from both ends of the floor, not just as a creator, but as a guy that can be a lockdown defender. So, and then of course they still have Kevin Porter, probably going to be in that backup unit across the board. Just so many great players. Jalen Green. This could be a season where he truly breaks out as one of the top young twos in our league. So all that put together, and I do like how they're kind of fitting together. Now the playing time distribution, that's going to be a question because they brought in some vets, so that's going to be interesting to say the least. But yeah, just looking at what they have from 1 through 5, what's kind of developing there. Tari Eason as a top notch defender to kind of bring everything together. I'm becoming a real fan. It wasn't long ago that they seemed kind of aimless and they didn't really have a direction or an identity, but it's coming into focus. And now that that's there, I think they're going to make a real push towards at least a play-in spot next season. But how do you feel about those guys now that they've added in a little more experience along with that youth there that they already have on board?
I'm very high on them. I mean, I was tempted to put them higher on this list. Like, I guess I would have them third, just behind Orlando. It's hard to compare, but like, yeah, there's probably a part of me that wants to just put them first because that's an insane collection of young talent.
Yeah,
Um, like, yeah, you kind of listed the names, but like Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Kevin Porter Jr. Like all these guys are like what 23 and under. Like
yeah,
maybe KPJ is
hmm
24. I don't know, but they're ridiculously young. I think an important thing to consider with them is just the coaching change. Like
yeah,
I think most of us can agree that Stephen Silas was not the right guy for that team. Maybe he'll latch
hmm
on somewhere else and find success later on. I hope he does, but I don't think he was the right guy. I'll put it that way. And to bring in Ime
that's fair.
Udoka, who might be able to maximize these guys' skill sets a little bit more. And yeah, a lot of people are kind of down on like the fact that they added Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, which means Amen's probably coming off the bench. Tari Eason and Whitmore probably coming off the bench. But like, those guys will still get minutes. And I think it'll be good for them to be around, guys like that, like those kind of professionals. So no, I'm very high on this team. I think that their talent level overall, or like if you're looking at just upside, I guess you could put it as. Like they might be the highest of all these teams because that's just so many exciting young players.
Right.
But again, like they've just been so, like you said, like they kind of seem directionless, disjointed, sloppy. People describe it as just like AAU basketball, like what they've been playing the last couple of years. Like they haven't shown us
Yeah.
anything yet. I think they will, but they just haven't yet. And I think that's why for me, like they're just a little bit below OKC and then Orlando. But yeah, I saw them at Summer League. I caught a couple of their games this past Summer League, and I mean, I saw Amen before he got hurt in his first game, and I mean, there's not too many. Somebody on Twitter today, I think it was Jason Timpf, was like, "Who's the most athletic player in the NBA?" And that was my pick. I was like, I think Amen Thompson might be
Mm.
the most athletic guy in the whole league. Like, he's
I
insane,
can
and yeah,
agree
if
with
that
that.
and Jabari, like people got so impatient with that kid his rookie year. It was like 2 weeks into his rookie season, people were like, "Oh, he's a bust."
Yeah.
Like,
Like,
come on,
really?
man.
Are we really doing
Nah,
this right
he's
now?
come on. I'm
Give
very
him a
excited
chance,
about
man.
him. So, and I like Şengün as like he's probably be my MIP pick if I had to pick one right now.
Mm,
I think he's gonna have a monster season. And Ime Udoka has
like
already talked about like, yeah, we're gonna use him like the way he hasn't been used yet, and we're gonna get Kevin Porter Jr. looks spot off ball. Like
yeah.
I think these kids are gonna look a lot better than they did last season. So they're a very like close third for me, but like that almost feels like a tier, just like OKC,
Yeah.
Orlando, Houston, kind of all in a tier of just super
Yeah.
dope young cores.
For sure. Yeah, I mean the usage is what stands out to me, and I mean Sengun's got to be used as a hub a little bit more. I don't think it did him any favors last season, just having those young guards just dribble air out the ball. Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. just operating on the perimeter, going in ISO mode, like it was an episode of like Hoop Mixtape or Ball Is Life or something, where they're just
Yeah,
trying to break their man down. It's like, hey, let's play a little bit more like Denver. Let's let Sengun operate in the high post and be a hub and let these other guys work off ball. I mean, Jalen Green could be a great cutter. Uh,
mhm,
Kevin Porter Jr. can be a great spot up guy. I mean, he's displayed an
mhm.
ability to spot up and be a good shooter. Cam Whitmore is definitely a better shooter than I think we gave him credit for coming in, at least based off of his summer league performance. So you look at all those different facets together. Amin Thompson streaking to the rim. Yeah, I'm my league pass subscription renews in about 2 weeks, and they're going to be one of my favorites for sure. The Rockets got to be probably top 3 league pass teams if you think about it. So yeah, they're going to be sensational, man. Like, and any way you think about it, there's a lot to be excited about um, for sure when it comes to that team for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm with you, man. Definitely top 3 league pass, and yeah, I think people are stressing a little too much about like, oh, Van Vliet. No, it's like he's got what 3 years with a team option on the third. Like he's probably only going to be there 2 years. Dylan Brooks is a tradable contract. Like when those guys are ready, when those young guys are ready to step into those roles, those roles will be there for them. And I
Oh yeah,
think based on what Udoka said, like so far, is like if Tari Eason outplays Dylan Brooks, like he'll get those minutes. Like I don't think
oh
he's
yeah,
too hung up on like, oh, Dylan Brooks is making 80 whatever million, like he's locked into 30 whatever minutes a game. Like I think if these young guys earn the minutes, they'll get them. So I think a little bit too much has been made about that. And it's like, look, they had to spend some money. Like they had, you know what I
they
mean? Like
did,
there's a
they did.
floor. So
Yeah,
well, you can question the decisions they made, like, oh, maybe they should have brought back Harden. I don't know about that. Like they Van Vliet was the guy
yeah,
they
I wasn't
wanted,
kidding.
and but it's not a super long term commitment, and he's like
That's true.
he's an awesome veteran, so I think it's going to be great for
Yeah,
these guys.
100%. Now, one more team here on this list of best young cores. They don't quite have the veteran presence that Houston has, but they have just as much talent. Detroit is my number 3. It was really close between them and Orlando for me. I almost put Detroit 4, and when I think about it, maybe they should be 4 just because of that front line. It's just such a question mark. It's like, all right, what do you do with Stewart? What do you do with Wiseman? What do you do with Marvin Bagley? Just a huge collection of talent, but not a lot of clearly defined roles right now for those guys. Cade Cunningham missed a lot of time his first 2 seasons. How does he look? So they have a ton of talent, but they've probably proven the least out of these 4 teams, and they have probably the lowest amount of proven players on this roster. So, I mean, Jaden Ivey had a good finish to last season. I think he started to kind of find himself as the games went along. Jalen Duren as well, when he got minutes, a double-double guy, would give him the opportunity. He could be a great shot blocker. And then, of course, Azar Thompson. Just talked about Amin Thompson, his brother, just as exciting. I think he has the ability to be an all defensive first team type of guy at some point in his career. I'm pretty confident in that. Just watching him at Summer League, watching some of his tape, just the way he can kind of just harass people, using his athleticism, the lateral quickness, his anticipation skills are on point. There was a Rico Hines run. There was some tape of that on Twitter that was floating around, and he was picking guys off left and right. So they have a lot going for them. And then they made a coaching change as well with Monty Williams coming in, and he got the bag, man. I mean, he's getting a player contract essentially. Where I think he got 80 million or something like that for coming in with Detroit. So yeah, I got to be excited about that as well. But Detroit, a lot going for them, but a lot of question marks as well for a variety of reasons on their side. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I probably had them fourth on this list, but I love a lot of their young players. Like Duren, I think, is a monster. Like, I mean, we saw what he did on the offensive glass and just as a finisher around the rim. Like he's like a man child. You know what I mean? He was the youngest player in the league last year, but he was just physically destroying guys like all year. He's obviously got a ways to go, but there's some stuff to really like about him. I'm very optimistic about his outlook, and yeah, getting Cade back. Like, I feel like we haven't really seen like the real Cade yet, because we had like rookie Cade and then 10, 12 games, whatever he played last year. That's very exciting. I know there's a lot of hype about what he could look like next year, and rightfully so. And I'm pretty high on Jaden Ivey as well. We all know his abilities as a slasher, just his athleticism. Like, nobody can stay in front of that dude, which is just a great ability to have in the NBA, obviously. And I actually believe in his jump shot going forward. Like, I like his mechanics. I like what he's shown this summer in terms of kind of widening his base on his jumper, shooting it with confidence, even though it didn't necessarily go in at Summer League. It looked like he was shooting the ball with confidence. I think he's going to end up being a pretty good shooter in time, especially with what he showed kind of toward the end of last season, and just with his reputation in terms of his work ethic. And then Asar blew me away. I saw him as well in person at Summer League, and he didn't even have a good game. I don't think the game I saw his debut. I don't even think he played that well, like in terms of stats, but just the athleticism and just some of the reads he made and just some of the hustle plays, like my jaw like dropped. And then I was, watched him on TV for some of the other games, like where he caught that two-hand reverse alley-oop, like just he a couple of those putbacks. And he's a crazy athlete. I think he's going to be awesome. But my only question with them is like kind of the fit, like not a lot of shooting, right? But like, yeah, if Cade could be kind of the shooter we thought he might be coming into the league, and if Ivy can continue to develop, then that isn't as much of an issue. But you still, when you're just talking about those four kind of core young pieces that I just mentioned, like none of them are really shooters at this point. So it's just a little bit of a question of fit for me. And then also, like you mentioned, they've shown the least probably of these. I mean, it's not like they were any worse than Houston last year, but Houston, I think, has a little more talent. We just haven't really seen it. And like, as much as I love Duren, like he is still a little bit unproven, a little bit like what's his ultimate version going to look like? And that sort of applies to a lot of guys on this team. Bagley and Wiseman, I'm not, thinking about, to be honest. Like, I'm more excited about Isaiah Stewart, say, than either of those guys. Like, I think he could be a pretty interesting stretch big that could really open things up for this team. Bagley and Wiseman, I don't see it. I don't like either one of them. I wish them the best. I hope they succeed, but I don't get excited about either of those guys, even though they are like young enough to be in this kind of young core conversation.
Yeah. I'm with you. Just summer league, like just watching Wiseman, like I still don't really see that much progress going into another year. Just you would think at this point he would show a little bit more, be a little bit more dominant. So I'm still kind of on the bandwagon for Bagley. I think I want to say last season he had some flashes there, either last season or I think it was last season of when he had some time to kind of really just get a lot of minutes, and I think he was at the 4 primarily, and there's a little bit there, but yeah, Wiseman, I'm kind of falling out of favor with him, or he's fallen out of favor with in my eyes a little bit just because of seeming like he's kind of stagnated, and I don't really know if it's a confidence thing or something's just not clicking there. So that's unfortunate, but they do have a lot of options when you look at their big man room. But Durden is definitely the number one guy there. He's shown the most, at least last season, and yeah, he's just a huge body inside that's going to give him the rim protection that really you need in the NBA to be a really competitive team. So those are the 4 teams I had. Of course, there's other ones. There's honorable mentions. I think Indiana has a
Yeah.
decent case to be a pretty good up and coming team. You know, they have a lot going for them, and I mean, there's several other teams, man. I mean, they that have a lot of great talent here. Portland is starting; they're kind of the starting line,
Mhm.
but you can already see something starting to develop there with their talent. But there's so much, man. I mean, we'd probably go for another hour for talking about more young cores in this league. But I want to at least get those 4 out there, just because they've shown the most, they have the most talent, and I think they're truly the future of the NBA when it comes to how these teams are built and what these guys have to offer. But any closing thoughts about these young cores before we kind of wrap things up?
I mean, it's just a really exciting time to be a fan of the league. Like when you look at just the depth of this young talent on so many of these teams, and yeah, like ones like Portland and Indiana that we didn't even really mention. And it's just cool to see teams prioritizing building through the draft. Like these, 4 teams that we mentioned, like of all those guys that we talked about, like okay, SGA was brought in a trade. Faults, I guess Kevin Porter Jr. Like, but everybody else pretty much that we mentioned was drafted by these teams. So that's
Yep.
just these teams wanting to, they're not selling off all their draft picks. They're accumulating them. They're trading for draft picks and they're building this way. So there's kind of just this wave of teams, and it's always the ones that we talk about when we're talking about the most exciting teams, but it's a proven strategy to building a winning roster. Like we've seen it a lot. Like the Celtics are largely homegrown. Well, not so much now,
Mhm.
they've made trades, but if you look at like
Yeah.
the Celtics that were in the finals, most of those guys were drafted by the Celtics. You look at the Grizzlies, like, Bane and Jaren and Ja, homegrown. Like, the Nuggets with Murray and Jokic, homegrown, like Michael Porter Jr., homegrown. Like, so I think it's a winning recipe, and I think more teams are catching on to that. I think when we look at these young teams that we mentioned, like that's how they're doing it. They're valuing the draft. And I think that's the way to go rather than just trying to piece together like a pretty good team, and sacrificing
Yep.
draft capital to do it. So I like the way these teams are building. It doesn't mean they're all going to be great. It's easy to think that they will be, but we know at least it's probably not going to work out for one of these teams, as hard as that is to
Yeah.
believe, like when we talk about
Mhm.
the level of young talent they have. But I do think it's the right approach. And I think at least a couple of these teams are going to be in, legitimate contenders within a few years, even when you talk about like
Yeah,
OKC, maybe Orlando, like they're going to be really good. So
for
I'm just
sure.
excited to see them develop, and it's cool that more teams are taking this approach.
Absolutely. I've talked about that on several of these podcasts here in NTC. The roster building approach for these teams is fascinating, and it's great for the future of the league. It's going to add to parity. It's going to give even more teams an opportunity to be competitive, be relevant, and that does nothing but provide us with more great experiences as fans. And then also for of course, those respective organizations, those cities are all going to benefit from that. So, 100% agree. All great points, man. But Brett, this winds us down for another podcast episode. I want to thank you again for joining us. Great time here. You got some great things going on Twitter. I'm just trying to be like you, man. Just trying to get try to get more of a presence up on Twitter and provide the masses with some good information there. So I encourage everybody to check him out. You can find Brett Usher NBA on Twitter. Got some great things going on there. Some great info, man. But appreciate the time and best with everything you got going on. Love what you're doing, and hope we can do it again soon.
Much appreciated, man. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome. And glad you enjoyed it. For all the listeners, notradeclause.com is where you can find all of our content, cap sheets, cap sheet percentage. We're going to have these new signings and the waiver made for JaVale McGee up pretty soon. So keep an eye on that. As far as other features, will definitely be coming soon, and we're going to keep you guys posted on that as we approach this new season. So please don't go anywhere. That's all coming very soon. But until then, guys, enjoy the rest of your day here. Thanks for coming on for another pod. We hope to see you on the next episode, and take care, everybody. We'll see you soon.